Okay. We'll get going. Okay, 30 seconds to spare. I'll call this meeting to order. I'll begin by apologizing to our audience. This is our first meeting back after the August break, and the agenda this afternoon has been incredibly tight, and so we closed the last meeting a little bit later than we anticipated. And I've got Councillor Hodge.
Yes, looking at the agenda tonight, item 12, the draft arena services and facilities strategy. I note there's a number of members in the audience here, probably for that item. I was wondering if we could move that item up to first on the agenda, please.
Okay, it's moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to move the agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, well, we'll just call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Mr. Clerk, item 12.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will just move the item forward. So item 12 is the draft arena services and facilities strategy. Staff recommendations that Council endorse the draft arena services and facilities strategy as the final strategy document, incorporating any minor comments and suggestions from Council. 2, the Council directs staff to proceed with the immediate short-term actions recommended in the report, including working with the City of Port Moody and the Coquitlam and Port Moody curling clubs to centralize curling services in the Tri-Cities at the Port Moody curling rink and make available the Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex curling rink for general arena use and allocation for skating ice in the fall of 2017. 3, that staff be directed to bring forward for Council consideration a budget request in the 2017 capital and operating plans to support the immediate short-term actions identified in the report, including the facility changes required for PSLC. And finally, the staff be directed to further explore options to meet long-term demand for arena services through either new city facilities or through public-private partnership opportunities and report back to Council.
Okay. Councillor Hodge, you wanted to deal with this differently?
Yes, this is certainly a very important discussion that we're about to embark on, and I note that the timing of it falling right after the summer break, and that there are, I think, a number of members of the curling club who would welcome the opportunity to speak directly to Council, possibly at a future Council and committee. So I'd like to defer this item to a future Council meeting to allow members of the curling club to be able to address Council.
Okay. Councillor Hodge, who chairs the Sports Council, moves a deferral to have a discussion, or at least to hear the perspectives of curling. Got seconded by Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Towner, who's the Vice Chair. We've got any discussion on deferral? Councillor Reid on deferral.
Am I allowed to direct also that the Curling Club of Port Moody be addressed as well before we bring back anything to this Council? We're suggesting, staff is suggesting that they get together, 2 clubs, amalgamate, and go to a different location. And I think it behooves us to talk to both clubs to see if that is their wish.
Okay. Any discussion on any further discussion? I'm not taking that as an amendment, but Mr. Clerk.
Not disagreeing with the content of the suggested direction. I think the challenge there would be the scheduling would be dependent on a third party upon which we have no direct influence. So it would quite possibly defer the item in perpetuity.
Okay, but we know where you're going. Councillor Hodge may have a solution here. Councillor Hodge.
Intent was just to delay this decision so that the group could apply as a delegation, and then we would have this discussion after we've had a chance to hear that delegation. I imagine that any group is welcome to, or any citizen is welcome to request to be a delegation. So my intent was just to delay this decision to allow that discussion to take place, but not to specifically identify who that discussion would take place with.
This would be to defer it so that any group that has an interest could apply to be a delegation before Council, or a joint delegation between 2 groups.
Yes.
Okay. That's seems to cover everything. Any further discussion on the motion to defer? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so what we've done here, for those people in the audience, we want to hear from the folks from curling. There's a perspective, and I get it, that voices haven't been heard. We never want that to happen. So let's Mr. Clerk.
So I just want to add a little bit of clarity there. We have a limited number of delegation opportunities, so it's not to be structured like a public hearing, and it's really a chance for the umbrella organizations to come forward and represent their members. Otherwise, we would just run into scheduling difficulties that couldn't be overcome. So if I could just suggest that you work with your groups and identify the appropriate umbrella organizations, and that would facilitate the process.
And I'm sure all letters to council, of course, are always welcome.
Letters to council are forwarded on the moment we receive them, and input from individual members can be made that way rather than through a delegation process.
So you hear the intent. We'll hear from everybody. We'll hear in person from the Curling Association at a council meeting. You have to apply for a delegation. Let's hear from you. Council and committee, you're right. Council and committee. Thank you very much. You can stay for the rest of the meeting. It's going to be riveting. Well, I wasn't being funny.
Is there sound of any sort? No.
Yeah, sorry. I agree. Okay. What did we say? Mr. Clerk, my deep apologies to our next speaker that her audience has left.
I think the most important people remain.
Oh.
Our next item 1, concerns the Coquitlam 2016 55+ BC Games. I'd like to invite Ms. Gayle Statton to come forward, who's going to give her President's Progress Report, and we have a presentation for that.
Let me begin. Ms. Statton, thank you for all the work you've been doing up till now and the work you are that's going to kill you over the next month.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Stewart and Council. I did think that everybody was here for me, but obviously not. So I hope to deliver some good news tonight, so thank you for having me here. Do I have the... Oh, thanks so much. So again, I hope this is good news. So 14 days out, kind of scary, but I'm not sure if I'm happier that it's closer or almost finished, but we're there anyways, 14 days. So about 3,200 registrations, so that is basically confirmed. I don't think we're going to have many more. We have a very special registration, and that's Mayor Stewart. He's going to swim, so everyone is very excited about that. I'm sure lots of press out for that. I hope you do well. Over 1,000 volunteers now, so I'm really happy to hear that we've actually come to that number, so that's great. We would like about 200 or 300 more, but it's been some really great work by a lot of people, so that's wonderful. 22 sports and venues, 22 activities and sports at 21 venues. As you know, we're using Rocky Point for dragon boating, the Port Moody Rec Center for table tennis, and Golden Eagle for golf. Other than that, we're using City of Coquitlam for all sports and venues. The majority of things happening at Town Center, 2 hubs, Town Center area, and the Poiré Sports and Leisure Complex. Excellent work by our sponsorship group coming up. They've been hitting the pavement pretty heavily the last couple of weeks. So we have about $100,000 in cash donations. Just so you know, the model is not only do they expect us to deliver the games, but they also expect us to raise money. So it has been a very, very tough event in order to do that. So they've done some really, really great work. In-kind contributions of about $90,000, so we're getting close to $200,000. So that's helping the bottom line very much, and obviously helping us deliver a better quality product. Really good volunteers. So as you know, I'm the president of a 12-member board. The host society includes 4 city liaisons who have been excellent, and I'd like to thank them personally: Debbie Clavel, Helga Ovington, Matt Pachuco, and Kevin Powell. So they've just been fabulous. So thank you for providing us them. It's been more of a partnership, so that's been great. We have training started, so all volunteers need to be trained, obviously, so they're starting September 17th and 15th, I believe. We do still need some more specific volunteers, medical, security, a few specialized things like that, so if any of you know where we can go out and try to recruit them, that would be great. I'm just super excited. I just think it's going to be a really great event. Schedules are ongoing, so we have Barry Lang here, who is sitting here in the nice, good shirt. Thanks for wearing that. So he is the director of sports, so this is his baby, and he has 22 chairs. They're helping him, making sure all the schedules get out and everything happens for that. Medal presentations are happening, etc. City staff has been, again, great for finalizing all the venues, getting them all nice and looking good so that everything looks wonderful there. And we're trying to encourage residents to get out. So that's kind of the model is, the first part of the games is awareness, obviously, for registrations, sponsorship, and volunteers. And now we've moved to awareness of the actual games in the city itself. So. Special events. So the special events start on Wednesday night with the opening ceremonies. Thursday night there's a participant special event down at the Hard Rock Casino, Vancouver. And then we have a banquet and dance on Friday night, and closing ceremonies and volunteer appreciation on Saturday. So I'm hoping to see Mayor Stewart and all the councillors out to those events. Love to see you at everything if you can make it, but those are the events, and I know that Debbie is working on a package for you so that you'll be there. Love to see you out for medal presentations. That would be great. And yeah, go from there. See wherever, and there's also beer gardens. There's 4 venues for beer gardens, so we can see you there too. There's no medals for the beer gardens, no drinking games. So Tri-City News has been fabulous in promoting the games. CKPM FM radio has been fabulous all along, actually, in supporting the games. We've got radio spots. We've got segments going on, 55 on the hour. We have updates and game results. Shaw around town, so I'm filming a segment tomorrow with Jerry Wallace about the opening ceremonies. They're providing TV coverage of curling and hockey. So it's just been great. They've been great supporters in promoting the games. The website has just been fabulous. Our promotions person, along with the city's communication people, have just done a really great job, both on the City of Coquitlam website and our website. Everything is there. I can't imagine people asking for anything more. Schedules will be updated there, game results, etc. We have official photographers at all the sites, medal presentations, etc. And we also have some volunteer young people that are going to be on the street that will actually be able to take pictures and upload them to Twitter and Facebook and everything immediately off their phones. So that's great too. Corporate communications, as I said, they have signage at all the major intersections. They have the City of Coquitlam website is linked, Facebook and Twitter, and also bus shelter ads are going up this month as well. That's about it.
There you go.
September 20th it starts, accreditation up at the Poirier Forum, and ready to go, 14 days.
Now, what is the latest you can register as a competitor? Like tomorrow morning, the council members can still register?
No, that date has long passed. We've made some exceptions, or one exception. But other than that, the date has passed.
Okay.
Any other questions? Great.
Outstanding. Well, I on behalf of council, again, thank you very much to you. Thank you to all of your team. You've got a great team of leaders. You've got a lot of volunteers and some great enthusiastic sponsors. I've talked to some of those companies, and they're looking forward to seeing the games that you're able to produce. It's going to be a great time. I remember going to an opening ceremonies a little more than a year ago in North Van, and getting really excited. And I can't believe that year has gone so quickly.
It's hard to believe, isn't it? It's been very fast.
And a closing ceremony, so
Yes.
it won't be long before we're talking about that. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you out there. Thank you.
I told you she couldn't say no.
You can stay.
Mr. Clerk, is there
people per item at this rate?
This is not sustainable.
Well, nothing will keep them like minutes. So next item is item 2, which is minutes of the public hearing held on Monday, July 25th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor, opposed, carried.
Item 3 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, July 25th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor, opposed, carried.
Item 4 is minutes of the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 17th. Recommendation to receive.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Asmussen. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Item 5 pertains to the minutes of the Sport Council meeting held on Thursday, June 9th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by the Chair, Councillor Hodge, seconded by Vice Chair, Councillor Towner. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Item 6 is minutes of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, July 5th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Chair Councillor Cirillo, seconded by Councillor Asmussen. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Item 7 is minutes of the Culture Services Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, July 14th. Recommendation to receive.
Again, moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Item 8 is a bylaw for final adoption. It concerns fourth and final reading of City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw number 4688. Staff recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw number 4688.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Cirillo to cancel a highway. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Item 9 concerns the zoning bylaw text amendment to the CD1 zone for the Waterfront Village Center neighborhood. This is at Fraser Mills. This is bylaw number 4698. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning text amendment bylaw number 4698. The bylaw number 4698 be referred to public hearing. That amendments to the Fraser Mills Development Agreement as documented in the report be required prior to consideration of fourth and final reading of bylaw number 4698.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reid. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I noted that prior to this evening, representatives of the company appeared before council and committee this afternoon. And the one question that I had written that I wanted to raise tonight, that I'd written in the margins of this report tonight, was answered this afternoon. And so if you weren't watching this afternoon or you weren't at this afternoon's meeting, that question was, how will this proposed change affect the commitment to no net loss of jobs? That's on talked about on page 2 of the executive summary. And that question was answered by the proponent at the committee meeting today. But I think it's really important to get this on the record, not just my recollection, but maybe have the general manager who was spearheading this talk about that important provision that council insisted on when it first approved the plan 8 years ago, and how that any impact that this change might have on the 1,500 jobs that were promised then, and whether or not that is being adhered to and can be adhered to with this change. Is there somebody maybe planning can speak to that specifically? If not, I will say that the...
Well, Mr. McIntyre has agreed to say something.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Mayor and Council. And if Councillor O'Neill wants to affirm on this target too, that'd be so much the better. But more seriously, that is that no net loss of employment for the site was one of the sort of the founding principles, if you will, of the Fraser Mills plan going back a number of years ago. I know there's a few council members, Your Worship included, that were part of those discussions, and that was really critical, essential to the original plan. And our sense is in more recent dealings with the proponent and their design team, and there is a representative from Bldg here tonight, Mr. Todd Ewan, who's leading up their industrial component. They are committed to that as well. What's being requested through this text amendment is to reduce the minimum floor area for this particular parcel. It's at the corner of United Boulevard and King Edward, to reduce the floor area and shift the unbuilt portion of that to another area of the site, which we would then examine again in the intended revisiting and revision of the neighborhood plan. And through that process, certainly from staff's perspective, and I think also from council's as well, a key goal will be to shoot for that no net loss of employment. And so a significant part of the Fraser Mills project will be employment generating component.
Thank you. That lines up with what I heard this afternoon as well. Thank you.
I might actually go just a little bit further. I wouldn't characterize it as a key goal. I would characterize it as a commitment that we will hold everybody to. This was, as I recall, around the table, every council member, to my recollection, myself included, Councillor Reid, Councillor Asmundson, we were there. Every council member made that a condition of their support of this project that did go through unanimously this time of year, 8 years ago, 2008. No net loss of employment. This is meant to be a significant generator of employment, and that it got our support because of that, in my opinion, and in the opinion of other members of council around the table. And we thank Mr. Bldg and the company for renewing that commitment today in our council and committee. And I know that we're heading toward what's going to be a great project on the waterfront in Coquitlam. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The next item concerns consideration of a housing agreement bylaw number 4704 for a 41-unit market rental apartment building at 945 and 951 Charland Avenue. Your Worship and members of council, staff has requested that this item be referred back to staff in order to continue to work with the applicant due to a number of issues that remain to be resolved.
The motion is to refer it back to staff. The motion is by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. On the motion to refer, Councillor Reid.
Are we allowed to ask why, or am I allowed to ask the questions I was going to ask here about parking?
No, you simply have to decide whether or not we're referring without knowing why.
I want to refer it back without comment?
No, you can ask why.
I would like to know why, but one of the things that I didn't see mentioned in the agreement was, I thought when this project came forward that I did not support, they got reduced parking, considerably reduced parking, and I understood that it was supposed to keep the rentals lower. So I thought they were going to be at the low end of the market rental, and I see nothing in the agreement that says that. So perhaps I misheard, but I believe when they put their project forward, that was the one thing that they said, that it was going to be on the lower end to keep a lower end market housing development.
That isn't how I remember it. I wasn't in support of the project.
Moderate, low end, that's what I heard.
I don't recall it being at the low end. I do remember it being market rental, and that there being some discussion that it would almost certainly be more expensive than similar older market rental in the neighborhood because it's older and this is newer. But I will look to staff if they have any better, clearer version of that.
That was the consideration for the parking. That's what I thought.
And to be clear, this is a motion to refer, but if there are some other things that council members wanted to have considered while staff are off considering the thing that they were going to be considering, and they'll tell us about it in just a moment, the reason for the request for the referral, please, I'm going to accept the speaker's list to give comment to staff on any other items. But Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. No, my recollection is just that. It was for market rental. Certainly through those discussions, there was the idea that by being rental, it would be more affordable than a condo type development. But no, there was never an interest or commitment on the developer's part to go below market in rental. It was simply to be a market rental building, and on that basis of being rental, they were seeking the various relaxations, parking for one, amenity area, and that. So that was not part of the original program.
So the reduced parking was just a gift, and there was nothing back for it. Is that it?
Well, the reduced parking, through the chair, is based on a couple of points. First, I think looking at other rental in the Austin Heights area, and there's that belt of rental buildings, you well know, north of Austin, and I think they're citing parking statistics or parking yield rates from those buildings, plus others around the Lower Mainland, and that plus their traffic consultant's assessment has come forward to sort of a test that they didn't get by with a lower parking standard for a market rental building in this location. And so it's on that basis that they are requesting the parking variance, I think, as well. They've, and perhaps Mr. Fuji could better speak to this, his staff have been dealing directly with the applicant, but there's a car share space I think they're providing as well to help deal with the parking situation. That was the basis for the parking relaxation request.
It's not my understanding, but I'm still opposed to it, so it doesn't matter. Thank you.
My recollection was that it was rental, period, and it was a strong push by council to have rental. In fact, I would have been surprised if the rental would be on the low end of market, since it is hard to justify construction of rental, and that was a perspective that I brought to it, and there may be some other perspectives of council members, but that's my recollection. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I have a question about something else. I see in the housing agreement that units are required to be rental, and that there's a specific provision in here that it's month to month, but I don't see a specific prohibition on a tenant renting their unit out on a nightly basis or one day at a time, like something via Airbnb or anything like that. And I'm just wondering, are we concerned with that? Are we comfortable with no provision against that kind of rental?
Mr. Fuji.
Through the chair to Councillor Towner, the zoning bylaw definitions regarding the multifamily uses wouldn't allow for that sort of Airbnb sort of approach, like the rental on a nightly basis. So the zoning would restrict those sort of uses.
So it doesn't have to go in the housing agreement; it's built into the zoning.
Not necessarily, but we can look at that as to further flush things out so that there's no confusion.
Well, I've been told that there's quite a few Airbnb units amongst the condos that are owned, and I'm just wondering if a renter could get into that market too with in a unit like this?
What we can do is we can speak to our lawyers about adding a clause within the housing agreement that would specifically prohibit that over and above the zoning restrictions so that there's no confusion.
I see nods around the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Srvc.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit lost. I thought the recommendation was first and second and third reading, so I don't think that's what I heard.
The motion is to defer at staff's request, and so I've entered. There are a number of members of council that wanted to speak at first, second, third. They might as well give staff their input now if staff are redrafting anything. So we're being flexible on that. So
sorry. So when did that happen? I'm sorry. I don't understand.
all right, staff requested, and actually we didn't get the answer as to Councillor Reid's first question, so we'll get that in a moment. Staff had requested a deferral.
Did I see that? Did we get an email? Sorry, I just.
It was announced at the start of the item, and the request to refer was moved by Councillor Asmussen.
Okay, so the first time we've heard it was the start of the item. Okay, yes. So yeah, I would like to know why, because I think it's been 8 months already. So.
Okay, and so the question is, why was staff's request? Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and sorry for the extreme late notice of this. We've been in discussion with the applicant, and since it is a housing agreement, there's lawyers involved as well, and there was just a few, one clause in particular, there were some differing views on that. It's the duration of the applicability of the housing agreement. And so it's still in discussion right now. And so between staff and the applicant, we, rather than trying to put pressure on coming to a quick, last-minute decision there, we want just a little bit more time to work through that. The applicant was comfortable with that. We will then bring this back. Our target is to have it back for the September 19th council meeting.
Okay, sorry. Which clause is it in the housing agreement that you're saying is under dispute right now?
It's around the duration of the housing agreement. Either a set
one
number.
That says for the life of the building, or
life of the building, or a duration of time. Yeah.
So I'm not sure where that one is, but.
So he wants it to read for almost the life of the building.
Your Worship, it gets a little more challenging than that. On one hand, there's obligations to maintain and keep the building at a certain standard, but then on the other hand, it has to be rental for the life of the building, so that theoretically would that be forever. So actually, it's a good question, and we were pondering that from the other side. So it's something we do want to work through, because this is a housing agreement that could have application with other market rental buildings we're starting to see in Coquitlam. So we think it's worth to work through this, and the rest of the package is ready to go. I know George's group has got the rezoning and DP package all ready to go, so it's just almost there.
Well, thank you. I agree with you, because it's always nice to do the due diligence to get it done.
Sorry, I'll get one bit of clarification if I can before Councillor Srvc. So you're saying that the term life of the building and the term and the maintenance requirements are essentially put us in a quandary, in that it's always possible to extend the life of a building short of catastrophic loss by maintaining it again, by replacing almost everything in it and still having a building. So if we require it to be maintained for the life of the building and to be a rental building as long as we maintain it, then it will never end, theoretically. Is that the argument?
Essentially, yes, Your Worship. I received the email from the file manager late in the afternoon. I happened to be back in the office and wanted to check with him just what the situation was. And that's the way he boiled it down to. We got a little bit of a dilemma here. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Srvc.
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with that. You said the date was September 19th, and I would just ask, all of us, I'm sure, feel the same. We need rental housing yesterday in this community, so if this happens to be one that could work for us, the sooner that we get it back to council, the better. I appreciate it.
Okay, good. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, so following up on that, the September 19th, when this report would come back, would the fourth and final reading of the actual rezoning bylaw and the DP come back following meeting? As you said, it's all ready to go. Is it in September as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Neal, that's correct. The DP and final rezoning adoption report will follow the housing agreement report.
And I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm really interested about what the DP, are we seeing substantial changes in the DP from what came before us at zoning? Because there was some talk about, well, we've rezoned it, we've passed the first few readings of rezoning, but you never know what's going to happen in the DP, and there was quite a split council on it. We looking for, are we going to be surprised in a big way? Should we get ready? Should we buckle up?
Again, through the chair to Councillor Neal, the integrity and the spirit of what council saw at the rezoning will be maintained through the development permit application, or has been maintained through the DP process.
Okay, good to hear that. And by the way, so totally, sort of related to what the mayor was saying about every part of a building replaced, that leads one to actually consider the philosophical question of when it ceases to be that building and becomes an entirely different building if every part of it's been replaced. And when it becomes an entirely different building, would this contract still be in place if every single part is in place? It's a Platonic, it goes right back to Greek philosophy. But we don't expect to answer that here.
Councillor O'Neill is having a motion for further debate.
That's right. That's right, using the Socratic method. Anyway, it's a fascinating thing. One more thing I'd like to make, and I know Councillor Reid is just trying to be provocative, and she feels passionately about this, but the reduced parking requirement is not, I never saw it as a gift. She used the word, is it just a gift to developers? We don't give developers gifts. And I don't know if she meant it that way or just she's feeling passionate about this, but it's not a gift to a developer. It's what the developer said was needed to make this sort of project work. And it actually caused, when this debate first came up, it caused me to think, maybe in our housing affordability strategy, we should have been more specific about parking requirements and amenity spaces for purpose-built rental. We considered all sorts of different things, but here the first developer comes to us after we've put that in place with a specific thing, and his big concerns are parking and amenity space, and he needs that to make this project fly. Yeah, those are pretty simple things, and we never really dealt directly with that stuff, as I recall, in our long housing affordability strategy. So I would just urge our planning department to be open-minded when the next one comes in, and hopefully council can be as well about, and I'm with Councillor Zarillo, is we need the rental housing yesterday. And on the issue of low cost or affordable, I think that my recollection of the discussion was that by definition this will be more affordable than having to buy a condo, and probably more affordable than living in and having to rent some condo from somebody who's bought one and then put it on the open market in a concrete tower with the full amenity space and the parking spaces and everything like that. It's likely that a wood frame, more modestly constructed building will command lower rental rates, and that's why it was likely to be more affordable, but never subsidized or anything like that, but just more meeting the needs of middle or lower middle income people. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, if I could just add one bit of clarification to Mr. Fuji's answer, just to support what was said to Councillor O'Neill. This will come back on the 19th. But the fourth and final reading of the rezoning will not come that same night, because this is only first 3 readings.
Oh, no, my question was about the bylaw and the DP, whether that
would not come on the 19th.
Oh, I knew that. And his answer wasn't that. It was come later. Yeah.
Subsequent.
Yeah, I understood it that way. No need to clarify. You're being scrupulous.
Better that than un.
It's a nature to be so.
He does it well. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is deferral.
Refer back to staff.
Yes, deferral back to staff. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. With comment.
Next item, item 11, concerns the zoning bylaw text amendments to regulations associated with service stations. Staff recommendations that council refer the application back to staff and direct the applicant to work with other industry members to bring forward a comprehensive strategy for providing better service to Coquitlam residents by addressing the issues documented in the report of the general manager.
Second.
And I will take that as the wording that was provided by the clerk. Has been moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Towner. On the question, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I was a little bit concerned about having the industry do the study that would show what should be required in a community. And I just thought that might not be a very objective study. So is there anything that we can do to make sure that it's not biased, or the perception of bias is not there?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, staff would, if the service station industry were to go down that path and take the lead, you can ensure that staff would be very diligent and vigilant in ensuring that it was done as objectively as possible, and if we any sort of sense that there is some bias, that we would ensure that we let the report writers know right away.
So if we entered into an agreement, I'm not exactly sure how this would work, but if we entered an agreement with them, we would be able to have some input in the terms of reference and how the study was conducted and that sort of thing?
Yes, of course, yes, yeah. In fact, we would identify the scope in terms of reference and issues to be addressed through the study, not the other way around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Srvc.
Thank you. Well, I support the referral back to staff, but I did want to mention we received an email earlier today from a member of the Universal Accessibility Committee about the importance of full service to people with disabilities and many others in the community. So what was mentioned in that email, and I think it's a good idea, that if this goes back to staff, that perhaps it could also go through the Universal Accessibility Committee. One of the things that came to my mind after I read that email is oftentimes full service, even if there's a station that has an island of full service and an island of self-service, that the full service is often a penny or two more per litre, so I wouldn't want discrimination against those that can't pump their own gas. So that was one, and then it came to my mind that perhaps if we're going to be able to send it to the Universal Accessibility, perhaps we could also send it to the Economic Development Committee for the City of Coquitlam. I think it would be a good balance to have community input as well as the industry. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know if I need to make that as an amendment or if it could just be considered. To the chair.
Yeah, we're just contemplating it. Mr. McIntyre.
Is council supportive of that? I think there's some reasonable requests that would be taken as direction. I think just as the question earlier about making sure there's objective research done.
Okay.
So we can do that?
I don't hear any objection from council. We'll have it appear on the agendas of both of those committees to the extent that they want to.
Just in support of Mr. McIntyre, I would agree with that. I think it then allows staff to choose where. I would like us to avoid applications going through advisory committees for vetting, whereas they can address it as part of the strategy process.
Yes,
yeah, that sounds
absolutely. Good. Okay, sounds good. Anything further? Anything further? Sorry. No, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I guess my only question was, we had the presentation from the industry rep, and at that time it was sort of said that this was not a priority for staff. and yet it's generated a significant amount of paper and a report here, and I note some surveying done of other municipalities. So I am concerned that this is coming forward outside of the work plan, but also recognize that it is the right of a property owner to to request zoning, although this one has rather widespread implications for sure. So it appears this is probably going to go forward for at least more consultation, but I do have a couple of questions right up at the front end here, and that is on the zoning. Reading through the report mentions that some cities do multiple zoning. So I guess in some zones they can have only full serve, some self-serve, some split bar. And I guess maybe I was incorrectly led to believe that we didn't have the ability to do site-specific zoning, or how does the other cities manage to do this? That if this were to go through, it's not a case of every gas station in the city becomes self-serve, or would it, or do we have options?
Through the chair to Councillor Hodge, the one example of a municipality which has at least 2 gas station zones is the city of Surrey, and in one of the zones is there is a requirement that there is at least a portion of the pumps, I can't recall the exact number, that provide some full service, which is the CG1 zone. And the other zone that Surrey has is another gas station zone, which allows 100% self-serve if the operator chooses to do so. So council has the ability to, zones different sites for different types of uses, and as they see appropriate.
One of the things that I know will come up is that some gas stations in Coquitlam, some of them have been here 50 years, and residents have moved next door right behind a gas station, knowing that it closes at 10 o'clock because it's not a self-serve gas station. Whereas in other areas, it may be appropriate to have a gas station on the corner of 2 arterial roads open. So this would allow us that option to say that only ones in, say, the town center have self-serve, or where. So we would have some options down the road when the time comes then.
Your Worship, if I could just on a point, that's actually a really good question. That just came up recently. We heard from one of those residents, and it adds an extra dimension to all this as an issue that we need to think about, that we will put on the table if the industry group wants to move forward in doing this research.
Okay. And my other question, and Councillor Cirillo touched on this, and I've heard this as well, that if we were to go to the dual bar, the self-serve next to full serve, and that may be where this goes, because I certainly want to maintain full serve, but I don't want the industry to, in a backhanded way, through the economies of the market, close down full serve by saying it's 5 cents a liter more, and then the next thing they sort of say, well, it's not profitable to run full serve. So is it possible to mandate, do we have the ability to wade into pricing and say you can have full service and self-serve, but they have to be of equal pricing? At what point do we cross into the marketplace and out of land use?
About 10 years ago.
Yes. We're there now. How far maybe the industry would voluntarily do that, and hopes, because my understanding is right now that the prices around are about the same. But if we offered it at the comparable, self-serve in Port Moody is about the same as full serve in Coquitlam. But if we were to offer it at the same gas station, you do go into gas station in Vancouver where you see that extra 2 cents a liter. So everybody goes to the other pump, and then they lay off staff. And I'm just sort of wondering, how far into that can we go?
Through the chair, certainly it's a slippery slope. We start getting into setting policy and regulation that affects how a business conducts its business, and we can take that away and give it some thought. But I would not want to be using the zoning bylaw to try to get at the price points for full serve versus self-serve gas. I think that's the sort of question, though, that we want, if in looking into this whole matter, what are the different models? What's that, the difference in terms of availability, service availability, employment, price points, and there's issues around all that as well. But this is something the industry, or at least Chevron, seems interested in pursuing, so we want to help set the framework for that study.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I had a question just about the process here. Have we ever had something quite like this, where we have a comprehensive strategy that is going to be led by a company and the company's association and involving the industry members? And I'm just curious, is this a unique thing that we're doing here? Is there a model for it somewhere else? Or is it somewhat similar to something we're doing in land use or something somewhere else? Or?
Well, it's similar to Riverview, maybe.
Yeah.
Where the landowner is leading the process.
Well, here we're actually willingly saying, you take the lead, and is it just a matter of our time and effort that we're not able to put into this? Because my initial response would be, somebody comes forward asking for a text amendment to a bylaw, and council and then staff looks into it and either recommends for it or against it, and then gives that report to council. But this is quite different. So just explain.
If I could offer a response to this, we did discuss this.
Go ahead. Yeah.
We did discuss this when the industry came forward. And our comment at that time was, unless there was some indication of support by council, this was not on our work program, and we would not spend the staff time necessary to do such a review. But if the industry wanted to spend the time and effort to do a credible study, we would certainly look at it. But if they wanted to push the issue, there would be a very short report recommending taking no action. So if that's what the result council is looking for, then that's what we would recommend. That's the alternative to this, is to take no action.
Right. It would be report no action. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
But it's not unheard of. I mean, I can't think of an example, but if, for example, we were a daycare provider wanted changes in the parking regs, and we said, well, staff just doesn't have the time. But if you could get together all of the daycare providers and make your pitch together, rather than just one of you, then we'd be able to listen better, I think. We're really looking for more of a consensus position among industry before we contemplate anything, before we spend any staff time on it. Okay, seeing no other speakers. Question is the referral. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Worship, item 12 was considered earlier. So moving on to item 13. This concerns soil removal amendment bylaw number 4703. Staff recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam soil removal amendment bylaw number 4703.
No one wants to move this one.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Towner. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I've had a suggestion from one of the aggregate producers that we should break the bylaw into two sections, because one to deal with the fee increase and the other to deal with the deposition bylaw. And the reason being simply is that we, the cities, are not double dipping for operators who actually have more pits than one that they would deposit and extract.
Okay. Were you looking for an answer on that, or that was just a comment?
Well, yeah, I guess to me there's the deposition fee, and the other one, from what I understand it, was just a Vancouver Consumer Price Index was the 0.3 cents.
If I could respond to that, the general reason for this report and this bylaw was because it was brought to our attention that there would be upcoming deposits which had the same effect on our road system as the removal, and that made clear sense because hauling in has the same effect on the roads as hauling out. Separately, since this bylaw had not been reviewed in a number of years, and council has in the past repeatedly not admonished us but reminded us to make smaller increases for inflation periodically as opposed to saving up for 10 years and having a big hit. It seemed appropriate simply to add the 3 years of inflation on this because we were updating the bylaw, and we're just doing it in accordance with the Consumer Price Index. But if council wanted to split that and not deal with that, that's at council's pleasure.
I could make the motion to split it and see if I get. Oh, I got a seconder. Wow.
We always separate at the request of a council member. Mr. Clerk may want some input here.
I guess my suggestion would be is if there was to be the splitting of the text of the bylaw, it would probably have to be referred back to staff because new bylaw text would have to be prepared. So it's not something I don't think we could do on the floor. It's
not separate recommendations, which is how we normally make division. We don't do that on. Okay, seeing nothing.
I guess I've got nothing.
Hold on, and I'll give you a chance for a second round if you like. In a moment, Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. Do I have to talk to the motion to split, or?
The motion to split isn't on the floor.
Not because he was. Oh, not. Okay, sure. Thank you. So I wanted to know financial implications. It seems a very broad statement here. There was no actual detailed financial implication answered here. It will be used to fund road maintenance and rehabilitation activities. Well, that's fine, but how much more money do we think that this will raise in the course of a year? The deposition part of it, not the 3 cents increase in the overall rate. Is there an estimate? Are we talking $5,000, $10,000, $20,000?
Mr. Umpleby.
The plan right now, the proposal from Lafarge is to bring in about 150,000 cubic meters of material, but that will go over about a 3-year period. So we're probably looking at about 50,000 cubic meters per year, say, which would be at 50 cents a cubic meter, it's about $25,000.
Perfect. I guess I could have done that math myself if I had known that. Oh, yes, all the figures are there, so thank you. Now, have we talked with Lafarge and any other person who might be affected by this about the deposition fee? Has there been any consultation with the industry whatsoever on this? Does Lafarge know this is coming, and do the other companies know this is coming?
At present, no. Through the chair, there has been no discussion with the gravel pit operators. This was simply an extension of a previous fee that was put in years ago where there was a charge for removing material, but at that time, I don't think people were really contemplating the restoration of these pits.
Okay, well, something else on top of this is, I remember when I first put in my backyard, which was all rocks and gravel when I moved into my home in Eagle Ridge 37 years ago, we had a full dump truck load of topsoil, 9 cubic yards, dumped onto my front yard, and we wheelbarrowed it back to the back. Now, that truck filled with dirt came from Pitt Meadows or someplace. It didn't come from Coquitlam. And would it have been subject to a deposition fee if the deposition fee had been in place? And if so, how would you have captured that? And how many companies are in similar situations, do you know, that bring topsoil, things like that, into the city for gardens and lawns and things like that?
Through the chair, no, that would not have been captured. This only applies to the gravel pits themselves within the city of Coquitlam. So the gravel pits up Pipeline Road, and there's one gravel pit out on Quarry Road. It would not apply to any other areas in the city.
So the bylaw actually specifies the exact areas, does it? Whereabouts does that specify the exact areas?
The amending bylaw won't, but if you look at the original bylaw, it will show the area that it applies to.
Okay, well that's good, because I thought we were really opening a bigger problem here if we're going to be starting to look at the topsoil and other things brought in here. Okay. If this is sent, so can you give me the rationale why you haven't at least talked to the other gravel operators about this new charge?
The feeling was that it was an oversight on the previous bylaw when it was put in, as I mentioned before. There was a charge at that time levied for removing gravel, but because the pits would be in operation for so many years, there was no contemplation of charging to bring the material back in to rehabilitate the pits. So now this is an extension of the removal.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually see it exactly that way. There are two different things that work here, and one of the most important things is that there is rehabilitation of gravel pits going on here, and we should be celebrating that and encouraging that and doing what we can to make that happen, not surprising everybody involved in the situation by saying, oh, by the way, you're doing all this and you have to fulfill all these Ministry of Mines rules and Ministry of Environment rules, and we're slapping you with a 50-cent cubic meter charge as well. And we're not even going to discuss that with you. We're not even going to tell you about that in advance. We're just going to do it. So I don't like that. And until you can tell me that there's been good consultation and discussion, and I'd like to hear what the people who are going to be hit with this have to say about it, I'm not ready to support this.
Well, I get that. I thank you for that perspective. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I could wax eloquently, or I could just say ditto to Councillor O'Neill's comments. This concerns me greatly that to look and say it's essentially housekeeping by bringing in the CPI piece over 3 years, that makes perfect sense to me. But to look and say we're now going to deal with deposits and not just removal, that is fundamentally changing the bylaw. And while we could say it may have been oversight, people didn't have the foresight that many years ago to look at what the remediation of these pits might be. It is significant. And to Councillor O'Neill's comments, I think when you look and say that when you talk to the people in the pipeline area, the residents that are there, they look forward to the day that the gravel pit no longer operates. And so that site remediation, I think they look forward to that happening. To look and say that it's being trucked in and dropped there, we're going to charge for that causes me concern. I mean, we've got a number of development sites around the city right now, of course, that they bring their product in from other parts of the Lower Mainland. It doesn't all come from these 2 pits or 3 pits that we've got here in Coquitlam. So I'm quite comfortable saying the 3 cents for the CPI for the soil removal. I get that. I would support that. But if we want to put on the deposit component as well, then I would suggest this needs to be referred back to staff and a separate bylaw to address that, or a new bylaw that addresses it all be brought forward in conjunction with some public consultation. Thank you.
Okay. I have no issue whatsoever with either one of these. I have no issue with the idea of sending it away for 2 separate bylaws. I will support both of them. This is 5,000 truckloads of soil coming into a site. That's not the 9 yards that were delivered to your home, although I'm a bit surprised you haven't coughed up the $4.50 you owe us. Yeah, I'll take it at the lower rate because it was before we passed this increase. This is a minor element, but it is significant in the fact that our city roads get eaten up by the gravel extraction. We get nothing out of the gravel extraction other than we get to cover the damage to our roads, not the inconvenience, not the damage to windshields and such, but the damage to our roads. And I think this is more than fair. I have no problem with it whatsoever. Councillor Reid.
I think personally that the aggregate industry could have been consulted. That's the only part I have. But I think that we are at a point in our history right now where we are going to start having the gravel pits be remediated, and there are no funds to do that. And I think that it's time we started capturing some of those funds. But I do think that the aggregate group could have been consulted. So I don't know how we do this and how long a consultation would take. I don't think it would take too long because I think there's a far better understanding in the aggregate industry than there is here about the pros and cons of this bylaw. The 3 cents, I don't care about. It's a consumer price index, but the deposition, I see it, but I can tell you we won't be the first and are not the first community to be going through this right now.
I'm happy to refer this back to staff, the instruction that...
Okay, we'll just hang on, hold that motion. It's not a motion, he didn't have the floor. Councillor Asmussen?
Well, I'm going to do what the mayor said. I don't have a problem with this going forward. I think the fact that the soil removal on extraction only takes a certain portion of roadway from pipeline out along. But once you get on to the other streets, Lowy Highway, all the three, which we just spent $18 million a few years ago rehabilitating, they go on those roads. There's no extra cost recovered for any of that. It's just a small portion of the roads exiting the main travel portion where they may split off to in different areas. And I think the soil intake now is a different issue. We have different soils that have been coming in for years for different projects in there. But if people want to move a motion for more consultation on this, I don't have a problem with that motion or supporting that motion. But I do think staff was right on the direction of this. I think the 3 cents is minimal of an increase on this. That's CPI, which is not always the true reflective cost of what our road costs are. I'd like in the future maybe a bit of design on what our road maintenance are, increases if it equals more than CPI. And so, but I think we're going in for the amount of damage that will be taken out. That's not a one truckload coming into a neighborhood once in a while, dropping off a small load of dirt. These are big tandem trucks coming in and out, which is quite a lot of weight on the roads. And so if somebody wants to make a motion to refer it back, I'll support it, but I think this is the right direction.
That gives staff almost till tomorrow morning to redraft the bylaw so that it can appear. I would urge that the motion not include a time frame so that staff can bring it back when it's ready. Okay, the motion is that it be referred back for timely staff action. Seconded by moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Zerillo. Anybody on that? Councillor O'Neill on that.
Yes, I think we have to say what we want to have happen in the referral back, and that's we want consultation with the industry. We want a rationale, a deeper rationale for why this deposition fee is needed, and we would want to, there's 3 things. Consultation and split the things as well. And so have it come back regardless in 2 parts. 2 different bylaws, one for the deposition and one for the CPI. So we can deal with those separately.
That's fine, but that wasn't in the motion, and I would be opposed to the first half of that. I don't necessarily need consultation. If the original bylaw had ignored, for example, the trucking of rock, it only covered the trucking of gravel. And so we came back and said, look, they're taking rock out, but they obviously we meant to include both, so we're going to change the bylaw. No, we should consult. And that after we consult, we should do what we're going to do because we know we're going to pass the 50 cents on the deposition, I suspect, because it only makes sense. We're trucking over top of our roads to go in and out of a particular facility that is industrial.
There's a fundamental difference in the extraction and deposition. The extraction is part of doing business in terms of they're making money on that, everything like that. This is, they add that into the cost of the loads that they're delivering to the people that they're delivering the gravel or the aggregate or the concrete to. But it's a totally different thing when you're bringing soils in to remediate, and you're not making any money on that. That's costing you a lot of money.
Well, actually, they'll probably make about $150 a load. Mr. Stevlin.
Mr. Umpleby has some information on that.
I thought
we think they're going to be charging somewhat for that, but I mean, Mr. Umpleby has a better answer to that.
That's news to me. I assumed something differently.
Mr. Umpleby.
Yes, Your Worship. I would anticipate that they will be charging to bring the material in, because I know whenever we get rid of material, we never get rid of it for free. It always costs us money to dispose of it.
Okay, that's interesting. I just thought that they would have to be buying all this material and then trucking it in.
No, we understand. We've seen the permit. The permit will be coming back to council separately. The permit to actually, the conservation permit, which is a planning process, not a fee permit. And it says it will be taking construction material. And we do know, just adding on to what Mr. Umpleby said, we do know that, for example, the Evergreen Line paid significant funds to actually KFN to dispose of the material on their sites. It costs the trucking industry a lot of money to get rid of this material, and there's money to be made by managing construction dump sites.
Well, this is good background to have, and we had a very scant report here that didn't give us much of anything, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion. We're getting more information. So, good. Thank you.
Okay. The motion is to refer still back to staff. I've got Councillor Wilson on that.
Just to try to put it in a bit more perspective too, would any of you have a rough idea of what the budget to reclaim this site is approximately? My understanding it was over $1 million.
I don't have a precise estimate, but this is a mandate of the provincial government that these sites have to be have a closure plan, and usually these kind of sites, the budget for those is very significant. I don't know if Jamie or Jim, for example, has any kind of update on that, but I would anticipate those budgets would be significant.
That's only my point is we're talking about $25,000 a year for 3 years. And in our meeting on the Coquitlam River Aggregate Committee, I think the budget figures that Lafarge was talking about were over $1 million. So, I think we got to keep it in perspective. Yes, it seems like a lot of money on the one hand, but it's part of something that they've budgeted for years, the whole life of their pit. They've had to plan for the day when they're going to reclaim it, and when you're talking about a budget that high, and the kind of wear and tear would be on our roads, I think it's justified. My perspective.
Okay. Mr. Clerk.
A motion that I will record, subject to revision of the mover, is that the item be referred back to staff in order to further review the proposed bylaw with council's observations in mind, and that it be come back to council in a timely manner.
Okay, he didn't get it. Yeah, you didn't get it in. I don't remember it in the bylaw. So if you'd like to move an amendment, because I do want to.
We can change with council's observations. It's just that some of the things were in opposition to each other. So I can say with for consultation.
Yeah.
I get it, but in your motion, I don't.
The word was not used in the last.
So if you'd like to move an amendment to your motion, just simply say in consultation with the gravel industry. If that's seconded, is there any questions on that? All in. No, Councillor Cirillo on the consultation.
But also to split it, right? We talked about we wanted to come back in 2 parts. Is that recorded anywhere?
Okay, that's okay. Sorry, that's out of order. We're now dealing with the amendment, which is only related to consultation, and we'll come back to that question in a moment. Any further discussion on the consultation? All in favor of and consultation with the industry? All opposed? I'm opposed, and so is Councillor Wilson. That motion carries. The motion as amended doesn't include splitting it into the bylaw provisions related to 53 cents and the bylaw provisions related to inbound soils.
Can I make that motion now?
Yes.
Is that the way to do it?
Motion to amend.
Motion to amend that it comes back in 2 parts. One with the adjustment for soil and the other one to include the new business, which is soil deposition.
Are there any impediments to because this is actually coming back as bylaws, not as staff recommendations, coming back as two separate bylaws. So a bylaw to amend the 50 cents to 53 cents and a bylaw to add inbound soils. I see nods, or maybe they're just nodding off.
I think, again, it might be best for staff to see what is the best vehicle in which to do that, whether it's two amendments to the same bylaw or there's a separate bylaw to deposition. And so I think where I said with council's observations in mind, and I will add, including consultation with the gravel operators, and if this amendment is successful, the best way to present the bylaw language about whether it's one or two bylaws. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Any further discussion? The question is coming back with two decisions. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. The motion as amended. We've amended it twice. We have to. Sorry? The only thing I have to do is keep track of this. And there's a Mr. Clerk.
That the item be referred back to staff in order to further review the proposed bylaw. With council's observations in mind, including a consultation with the gravel operators and the appropriate bylaw amendments required, and that it come back to council in a timely manner.
Don't move it. Okay, that motion as amended is on the floor. Any further discussion? It's already on the floor.
Councillor Zerrill is already the seconder.
You're already seconder before it's two amendments. Any further discussion? The motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. In a timely manner. Mr. Clerk. Naloxone.
The next item, item 14, is a report of the fire chief, and it pertains to participation in the Provincial Naloxone initiative. Should have asked the chief pronunciation tips ahead of time. The staff recommendations is that council authorize staff in the Coquitlam Fire Rescue Department to administer naloxone in the course of their duties under the Provincial Naloxone Initiative, and authorize the fire chief to execute an agreement between the City of Coquitlam and the British Columbia Emergency Health Services in respect of this initiative.
Dropped. Oh,
come on. You're kidding me.
So did it twice.
Are you? Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Marsden on the Naloxone initiative. Before we get to questions, comments from council, does the fire chief have any pronunciation assistance he wants to offer, or other advice he wants to give us?
The correct pronunciation is naloxone. And the report, good evening, Mayor and Council. The report before you, of course, is as stated for Coquitlam Fire Rescue to be trained in the administration of naloxone as per the provincial program. And in order to do that, we will need to sign an agreement with the British Columbia Emergency Health Services.
Well, I thank you. You don't bring very many reports before us, and this one I think is particularly important with the epidemic of overdose, narcotic overdose. We've been facing both expanding the use of Narcan and expanding the use of naloxone, particularly by emergency first responders, I think is one of those important initiatives, and this report will do it here in Coquitlam and make it so that you have the tools you need. I thank you very much for bringing that before us, and I've got Councillor Reid.
Do we get compensated for doing this?
Through the chair, Councillor Reid, no, actually we don't. It follows along the line of our emergency responder program that local government adheres to, so we provide medical services in a variety of ways that we are not compensated for.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Oh, I meant to turn mine off. I'm sorry. It's going off.
Okay. Councillor Hodge.
Okay. A note here in the report says 15 fire apparatuses, so that's basically any of our first line of responding apparatus will have, so it's pumpers, rescue, all equipment that's responding. The other question I had is that I note here that, well, actually, I guess I'll back that up. Do our firefighters currently do any other administering of drugs? I know they do oxygen, things like that. Is this sort of a whole sort of new area? I think it's very important. I'm glad we're doing it, but I'm just sort of wondering how much of a change is this from the other types of medical calls that they do?
Through the chair, Councillor Hodge, it is significant change in that this is the first time the fire service, within the confines of the emergency first responder program, has been given the training to administer drugs.
And these are intravenous? They're a shot?
It would not be intravenous. It's IM or intramuscular delivery of the drug.
Like an EpiPen or something, that type of thing?
That is correct.
And I note in the report that it says first responders must obtain approval from an on-call doctor. How does that work? Do they radio in, or when the call comes in, they've already been evaluated that this is what they're going to? I'm just sort of wondering, because again, that's a departure from current procedure where you've got to sort of be having communications with somebody else.
That's correct. Again, through the chair, it'll be done through cell phone. It could be done through radio, but once arriving on scene and diagnosing that they have an opioid overdose, they will call the physician on scene in order to get permission to administer the drug. It is not a deviation in the practices of the BC ambulance crews that their BLS or basic life support also must do the same thing. Even the advanced care paramedics, the ALS, at times will phone those support physicians for permission in giving certain drugs as well.
And is that somebody that they phone into like a 911 center, or is it an emergency ward, or is there a doctor in the control center? I'm just sort of curious as to who they call, and I'm assuming that it's sort of first ring and somebody picks up the phone.
Again, that is correct. The BC EHS Emergency Call Center has online physicians that are on duty 24/7 to pick up those calls.
So they would just say, this is respiration, or this is whatever, and this is why we believe this is what we're dealing with, and then they have the permission to administer.
That's right.
Good. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
Thank you for this report, and it's sad. It's very sad that our society has gotten to this point where I think, are we still in? Through the chair, are we still in the overdose a BC crisis, mental health or health crisis? Are we still in that? Yes. Is it still declared? So I just made note that it was mentioned that this is a significant change for the firefighters in our community, and it's an increasing responsibility. So I have a question, and the question just relates to the pressure of saving lives. And now we've got this added one where there'll be an expectation that they'll be able to save lives in a different way. So I'm just wondering, do we as a city need to look at having additional mental health support for our firefighters, or even some preemptive handling of overdose situations? Like, is there some additional support that we could be offering now that this is a significant change and it's an increase in the responsibility? Because it seems from the news that it's just going to get more and more incidents of overdose. Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah, that's fine.
Through the chair, Coquitlam Fire Rescue and many of the fire services, we have processes in place currently through our critical incident stress management. The UBCM initiative that Council helped spearhead just a while back as well is going forward. But the mental health of the fire services and emergency first responders, the paramedics and police officers and others, is moving forward in a big way. It's being recognized by WorkSafe. But Coquitlam Fire Rescue has many processes already in place to deal with issues. The fire service has been dealing with traumatic events for some time. This one I don't see as being any more or less traumatic traumatic than a lot of the other things that firefighters do. There are many medical interventions we currently do that are far more traumatic than this will be. One must remember that we have been dealing with naloxone and opioid overdoses for some time now, in that we are manually breathing for these people through a bag valve mask, inserting an airway, and sometimes maintaining their life support for 15, 20 minutes at a time. And there's various things that can happen while a person is unconscious, and we're dealing with that now. I see this as helping that process, so it's less traumatic in some ways. We'll get quicker results in reviving these people, rather than the many things that can go wrong when you are manually breathing for someone who's not breathing.
That's really, really interesting information. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I would hate to think that I would be involved in a decision that would make it harder for them. So you've alleviated that for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you. Friends of mine are within the Vancouver Fire Department where I used to come in. I understand they've been using Narcan or naloxone for a number of years in the city of Vancouver, administering it in the downtown east side. So this is just something new for other fire departments outside of the Vancouver force?
Through the chair, Councillor Asmundson, in January, early January, is when the naloxone initiative was brought forward to the fire services. At that time, Vancouver and Surrey were the first two to come on board. So it's really only been recently in this year that they have been using naloxone. Narcan is also a similar drug that has been in use for years.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Narcan and naloxone are similar things, but Narcan is the same effect. But that's been used in the Vancouver Fire Department for a number of years now for overdoses and people in distress.
Vancouver Fire has not been able to administer Narcan.
No?
No, they recently just came on board as well.
Okay, that was my mistake. Thank you.
And of course, Chief Peerlett knows Vancouver somewhat well, having spent some time there. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I just want to say that I am fully supportive of this. We all know that a public health emergency was declared back in April in the province. And it seems like lately you turn on the news and we're hearing about a lot of these overdoses. There was 20 in Surrey recently, and just last week there was 9 in Delta, all in a 20-minute period. And from what I understand, they all survived. All the people survived because of the naloxone. So I echo Councillor Zerillo's sentiments that I think it's really sad. But to me, it makes sense. Earlier this year, the take-home kits were made available. So if regular people can have the kit and take it home, I think it does make sense for our first responders to have it and be taught how to use it. And I thank you for being willing to participate in this program.
July 22nd, 2003, I was involved in a car accident that put me on extensive opioids, extensive narcotic painkillers for some time there, but for the grace of God. So many people that are on what we sometimes consider as simply a recreational, a self-inflicted addiction got there through some injury. So all too often we end up as a society blaming addicted for their addictions, and sometimes it's their fault, but sometimes it's mental illness, which has touched our family, but addictions haven't. Sometimes it's an addiction that comes out of a long-term use of a narcotic for excruciating pain. And I know of one family that the father's dead now, but he lost everything to that kind of painkiller, that kind of an addiction that came with his long-term use of morphine to manage the pain from a workplace injury. So we have to, at the same time as we work hard to save these lives, we actually have to work hard to deal with the addictions, and we can't do that if the firefighters don't have the tools necessary to bring them back when particularly when the current epidemic, the epidemic caused by a new narcotic, a contaminant that's in the narcotics they're used to taking, That has caused some real challenges for first responders, and this is a great tool. It's a finger in the dike, though. We've got lots of work to do as a society to tackle the challenges of mental illness and the challenges of addictions, and sometimes they're not the same. The question is naloxone for our firefighters. All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries unanimously and with our thanks.
Next item, item 15, pertains to the Smoking Control E-Cigarette Amendment Bylaw number 4557. Staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Smoking Control Amendment E-Cigarette Bylaw number 4557.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Sorry, I thought that was left from the last time. Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. When this first came before us, I expressed some small reservations. Just wanted to make sure we had all of our scientific research lined up, and wanted to make sure that the provincial government and the provincial health authorities were supportive of this sort of thing. And since then, there's a lot has happened. The provincial government has moved to regulate. And significantly as well, I've been collecting a few clippings. July 29th, e-cigarette vapor releases dangerous chemicals, study finds. That's out of Washington, D.C. Researchers at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab found all sorts of dangerous chemicals being released by e-cigarettes. So it's not harmless, and that lines up with some other things as well. So I was pleased to see that. Now, something else that I raised, was that, and it's one of the reasons I expressed some reservation at the time, was that e-cigarettes are less harmful to the user than regular cigarettes, and I wanted to make sure that message doesn't get lost. And I was really pleased to see in the August 31st edition of the Vancouver Sun on page A11, Dr. Mark Tyndall, the Deputy Provincial Health Officer in British Columbia, basically supporting the regulation of e-cigarettes, also said that now that those regulations are in place, and we'll have regulations in place now too, to help prevent the use of e-cigarettes specifically among young people, we must turn our efforts to increasing the access and uptake of e-cigarettes to the nearly 5 million chronic tobacco smokers in Canada. So that's not a public health message that I think the city can get involved in, but I'm glad to see that the provincial government is looking at that now. So if you're addicted to tobacco, please, as a way to get off that, don't be deterred by the new restrictions on e-cigarettes to turning to e-cigarettes. There are places to use those, and that's so much safer than smoking tobacco. So we've got the Deputy Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Mark Tyndall, is clear with that message, and that really gives me some satisfaction that the benefit of e-cigarettes isn't going to get lost in the move to regulate. So I'll be supporting our regulation of e-cigarettes because I think it's in the proper context now. With the scientific background there that's come up very clearly, the letter we got from the Canadian Cancer Society, the information that's in the report, that's all lined up there now. So I'll be supporting this, but let's not lose sight of the fact that this is way less dangerous than cigarette smoking. And for those of you who are hooked, consider this as a way of getting out. Thank you.
And Councillor Zerillo in rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we just got back from France and Spain, and I can tell you that e-cigarette smoking is all over. People are just walking around with it, just vaping it everywhere. It's quite interesting. At least cigarettes are kind of in your pocket or your purse, but they just carry it in their hand like their cell phone on, just smoke all the time. So that's just a little anecdote I wanted to share. But I did want to ask a question of staff, and I'm sure the answer is we can't do anything, but I thought I would give it a try. The provincial government is now regulating, I think, as of 1st of September, or, yeah, e-cigarettes as tobacco. And I was just wondering about advertising now then, because I know there's very strict regulations on advertisement for tobacco. but I'm wondering if the city has any authority to regulate advertising signs, standing or mobile, because I am aware of some mobile signage in the city of Coquitlam advertising e-cigarette outlets. So I'm just wondering if we have any jurisdiction on that advertising or limitation of advertising.
So this would be a motor vehicle sign.
Through the chair, I'm glad that I've got my planning colleagues to the left here as they manage our sign bylaw. I know that mobile signs are a challenge. They're largely dealt with under the Motor Vehicle Act, the provincial legislation. And sign content in general is not something that municipalities tend to regulate for various Charter of Rights reasons. In the case of tobacco and e-cigarettes, the provincial legislation does cover a lot of that off, the same way that we no longer have Benson and Hedges presents the Symphony of Lights, or we generally are not going to see much in the way of e-cigarette advertising as well. The provincial mandate is really trying to limit the exposure to persons 19 and over, and does that in the same way that they regulate the display of cigarettes in grocery stores and other retailers. It's segregated areas, no blatant advertising type rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just wondering if, so I guess that was my question was, yeah, of course the province and even federally they regulate the advertisement, but can we limit a sandwich board or someone sticking it on the side of their car? That's all. And I think what I'm hearing you say is no.
I think the general answer would be no. There may be some small areas that we could consider in terms of not necessarily specific to cigarettes or e-cigarettes, but in the overall sense of how many signs a business is permitted. There's an enforcement that happens on that level, and whether they choose to use their one sign per window or whatever the regulation is for e-cigarettes or not, it becomes a bit more of a business decision.
All right. Well, I'll just take this opportunity to say thank you to staff for being ahead of this and being right on top of it at the time that the provincial government was. So thank you.
I am always amazed at the ways in which human beings contemplate how to put things into their bodies that don't belong in their bodies, and this is a great example. I caution those that say that they're way safer than cigarettes. The known risks of e-cigarettes are way lower than the known risks of cigarettes. But there are some elements that have been shown in some other countries' studies that haven't yet been shown in Canadian studies. Mind you, not all e-cigarette vapor is available in Canada. Some of it isn't available at all, stuff containing, well, in any case, I just wish we weren't going down this path. We were on a decline related to the use of cigarettes in Canada, and now the number of times I'm behind a car and the e-cigarette cannot be safe because I can't see through the car, and so even if they're looking from the midpoint, they're looking through a dense fog at whatever they're driving through. It is astounding to me. We live in an area of the world that has pretty clean air, and we need to go out and spend a lot of money in order to make it dirty again. Okay, the motion is fourth and final reading. All opposed, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item 16 pertains to the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for their meeting of July 29th. Board representatives are available to respond to questions and the staff recommendations that Council received for information in the Board and Brief.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Zerlo.
While we're on cigarettes and e-cigarettes, I'm sorry, but I just cannot lose this opportunity to talk about item potential impacts of cigarette butts on aquatic life. Last page, page 7. So this was during the summer. I said I was in France, and I could not believe the number of smokers, for one thing, but everybody flicks their butt, and it made me realize that even in Coquitlam, in fact, I saw it yesterday at the no, it didn't sound good. I saw it at the Superstore parking lot. Someone was just walking along, and they just flicked their butt. I saw an actual business owner in downtown Coquitlam come out of their store, smoke put their butt in the drain. So this was bothering me. In the future, I would like to do more thought and research about how we can get to be a butt-free Coquitlam. But for now, I'm very interested in this study about potential impacts of cigarette butts on aquatic life, because it made me think, what about storm drains and our system here in Coquitlam, where there's often signs that say these drains are going right to our rivers and our streams. So I just was wondering if we've ever done any research on that. And we could stop throwing our cigarette butts on the street. But more, I just wanted to understand where how much do we find cigarette butts in our lakes and streams based on it going down our gutters here in Coquitlam.
The context of the report at Metro, and I'll leave it for staff to answer the last question, but the context of the report was the residual contamination of the water from the in situ cigarette butt sitting on the street, perhaps being run over by several cars in the rain, and the now nicotine contaminated and other chemical contaminated water ending up in the stream. That is the context of the analysis that's being undertaken by Metro. It's a good part of being a region is that individual cities don't have to go do that if there's a regional significance to it. I'm not even certain it's regional. It certainly is national, international, but Metro Vancouver wanted to examine the possibility that some mitigation might be in order, or at least some monitoring might be in order related to the effect that smoking might have on aquatic life.
Well, I'm interested in the results. I'm interested to see,
could
could it have impact in Coquitlam and into our water systems too?
It wasn't unanimously supported, but it was supported, and those results we'll make sure we bring them back to council.
That would be awesome. And in the meantime, let's all start thinking about a butt-free Coquitlam. Just saying.
Take that different ways.
I won't click any butts.
Okay.
No buts about it, yes. Well, it is infuriating, and I know other council members have raised it, and I've seen it, and we adopt that little section of street, and that little section, if you actually stop and take the cigarette butts, would take us hours and hours every week to do that little section because of the number of people at a stoplight that think a cigarette butt isn't garbage.
Litter, yeah.
It isn't litter. We would yell at them if they took their gum wrapper and threw it out or something like that, but a cigarette butt has way more chemical in it, and it ends up on our streets, and it's disgusting, and all of those things. And we should raise the fine, and et cetera.
So I'd like to see it come back to this council.
I will commit to trying to remember to bring the results back, and I'm sure we'll get that back to her. Anybody? I'm 57 years old. Anybody else on the Metro Vancouver? A motion to receive.
Already been moved in second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second.
Adjournment has been moved by Councillor O'Neill and seconded by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Do any of the audience members have any questions on tonight's agenda? Any at all? Any at all? Thank you all for coming. Please leave single file.